When you built the project in Lesson 1.3, you might have noticed the Clean and Rebuild options in the shortcut menu. You'll learn how to use Clean and Rebuild in this lesson. To begin, open your Sample Files folder, open the Joe's Bar Web Application folder, and open the Bin folder. Whenever you build the project, a copy of its compiled code is placed into this folder, as well as the original compiled code in the OBJ folder. This happens regardless of which build profile is selected. The Bin folder is only used by Visual Studio's debugger. These are the files that are used by the virtual web server when you run a project in debug mode. Now open the Joe's Bar Web Application project, but don't close Windows Explorer because you're going to return to the Bin folder in a moment. Within Visual Studio, you'll need to build the project. To do this, right-click on Joe's Bar Web Application in the Solution Explorer and click Build. Building the project compiles its code into a DLL file, but a new DLL file will only be created if the code has changed. Note that the project is automatically built every time you start debugging. Return to the Bin folder in Windows Explorer now, and if you examine the Date Modified fields, you should see that building the project has not changed the DLL files. The code hasn't changed since the project was last built, so Visual Studio didn't bother to rebuild the files. If you find that Date Modified has changed, return to Visual Studio and repeat the process. Notice that the mailmodule.dll and mailmodule.xml files are never updated when you build the project. This is because mailmodule.dll is not created by this project's C# code. You added mailmodule.dll to this project in Lesson 1.2. Next, you're going to clean the project. Return to Visual Studio, right-click on Joe's Bar Web Application in the Solution Explorer, and click Clean from the shortcut menu. Now return to the Bin folder in Windows Explorer, and you can see that it's now completely empty. Cleaning the project removes all of the compiled files from the Bin folder. Cleaning also removes the files from the OBJ folder for the selected build profile. For more on the OBJ folder, see Lesson 1.3. Return to Visual Studio now, and build the project again by right-clicking on Joe's Bar Web Application and clicking Build. If you now return to the Bin folder, you can see that the compiled files have reappeared. But if you look at the Date Modified field, you can see that Joe's Bar Web Application.dll has actually been recreated this time. The two mail module files have also been copied from the location pointed to by the project's references. This is a more complete way of rebuilding your project, but it's a little inconvenient to both clean and build every time you want to do this. This is why the Rebuild option exists. Return to Visual Studio, right-click on Joe's Bar web application in the Solution Explorer and click Rebuild. This is exactly the same as first cleaning and then building your project. If you examine the bin folder again, the date-modified fields show that the files have been completely recreated, even though the code has not changed. Since your project automatically builds whenever you publish it or run it in debug mode, you rarely need to build it manually. On rare occasions, Visual Studio may not recognize changes to your project, and they may not be visible in debug mode. If this happens, you should use the Rebuild option to force Visual Studio to completely recompile the code. There's really never any reason to use the Clean option followed by Build, as using Rebuild does both in one operation. Close Visual Studio now, and you've now completed Lesson 1.4, Build, Rebuild, and Clean a Project.